I'm Harper, 28 years old. You only got invited out of pity. Don't stay too long. Those were my mother's exact words as I stood in their kitchen on Christmas morning, holding a wine glass that suddenly felt too heavy in my hands. The room full of my family continued their conversations as if nothing had happened, as if my world hadn't just crumbled. I smiled, finished my wine in one slow sip, and walked out of that house for what I decided would be the last time. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely invisible in your own family. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. But let me back up and tell you how I ended up standing in that kitchen, realizing that the people I'd been supporting financially for 9 years had invited me to Christmas dinner out of pity. My name is Harper Williams, and I'm what you'd call successful by most standards. I started my real estate career at 19, working nights and weekends while other people my age were figuring out their majors. By 21, I had my license and a burning desire to prove that the girl who got kicked out of family photos for not smiling pretty enough could make something of herself. I was good at it. Really good. While my sister Claire was getting her degree in communications and my brother David was finding himself through various part-time jobs, I was closing six-figure deals and building a client base that most agents spend decades cultivating. 9 years ago, when I moved out of my parents' house, my mother called me crying. The electricity bill had come in higher than expected, and Dad's hours at the factory had been cut. Could I help? Just this once? I remember standing in my tiny studio apartment, looking at my first real paycheck from a big commission. Of course, I said. Family helps family, right? That first payment was supposed to be temporary, just until Dad's hours picked up. But then the car needed repairs. Then David's student loan payments started. Then Claire needed help with her wedding costs. Each time they called me, and each time I said yes. The smart thing would have been to just send money. Instead, I did what felt more permanent, more helpful. I put the utility bills in my name, co-signed for David's apartment lease, added Claire to my credit cards, put my name on the insurance policies. It started small, but over 9 years, I'd essentially become the financial backbone of my entire family. The irony wasn't lost on me. The daughter they'd never quite seemed to like was the one keeping their lights on. But honestly, I didn't mind. I was working 70-hour weeks, traveling constantly for high-end property deals. I barely had time for relationships, let alone keeping track of every bill I was paying. If this was how I could contribute to the family, how I could show love when I couldn't show up, then fine. Looking back now, and trust me, hindsight is 20/20 when you're sitting in your car outside the house where you just got told you're a pity invite, I realize I was buying affection, trying to purchase a place at their table with monthly automatic payments. The problem with buying love is that the people selling it never seem to think you've paid enough. The first sign something was wrong should have been how easily they accepted my help. When I offered to take over the electric bill that first time, there were no questions about whether I could afford it, no insistence that it was temporary, no discussion of paying me back, just relief and immediate instructions on how to set up the account transfer. Normal families would have been embarrassed, right? Would have insisted on treating it as a loan, would have checked in to make sure I wasn't struggling financially myself. But my family just accepted it. Like I was some kind of walking ATM they'd been waiting their whole lives to access. And because I'm apparently an optimist disguised as a successful businesswoman, I thought this meant they trusted me. Thought it meant they saw me as capable, responsible, the successful daughter who had her life together. What it actually meant was that they'd found a solution to their financial problems, and my feelings about it weren't part of the equation. Over the next few years, the requests kept coming. Always urgent, always emotional, always with just enough family guilt sprinkled on top to make saying no feel cruel. Harper, honey, you know we wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate. You're doing so well with your business and we just need a little help getting back on our feet. Family sticks together, right? Right, family sticks together. I just didn't realize I was the only one with glue. David's credit was shot by the time he turned 25. Apparently, finding yourself includes finding several maxed-out credit cards and a few missed loan payments. So when he needed an apartment that would accept his application, guess whose name went on the lease? Claire wanted a wedding that looked like something out of a magazine, but her fiancé was still in graduate school, and her job at the nonprofit paid about as much as I spend on coffee each month. So guess whose credit cards financed the venue, the dress, the flowers, and the honeymoon? My parents' mortgage had an adjustable rate that started adjusting in the wrong direction. Dad's factory job came with decent hourly wages but lousy benefits, and Mom's part-time work at the library wasn't exactly covering the gap. So guess whose name got added to the mortgage refinance to qualify for better terms? Each time I told myself it was temporary. Each time I told myself this was what successful family members do. They help. Each time, I told myself that this was how I showed love to people who seemed to have a hard time showing it back. But you know what's funny about temporary financial help? It has a way of becoming permanent really quickly when nobody talks about exit strategies. I was making good money. Really good money. High-end residential real estate in our city meant commissions that could cover these family expenses without seriously impacting my lifestyle. I lived modestly by choice, drove practical cars, invested most of my earnings. Taking care of my family's bills felt like a reasonable use of my success. The problem wasn't the money itself. The problem was that somewhere along the line, paying their bills became my expected contribution to family relationships. Not a favor I was doing, not a temporary help I was providing, but an obligation that came with being Harper. When my cousin got married 3 years ago, I flew back from a business conference in Chicago to attend the wedding. I spent the entire reception listening to relatives praise Claire's job at the nonprofit and David's latest creative endeavor while my career got exactly one mention. Harper's doing well with her house business. House business. Like I was selling candy bars door to door instead of representing multi-million-dollar properties. But hey, at least my house business was keeping their houses running. You know what nobody tells you about being the family ATM? People stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as a resource. Phone calls from my family followed a predictable pattern. How are you? Fine. How's work? Fine. How's the weather? Fine. Oh, by the way, there's this small thing. The small thing was never small. My mother's car transmission died on a Tuesday. By Wednesday, she'd already found a replacement vehicle and was texting me photos of the financing paperwork that needed a co-signer with better credit. Not, can you help me figure this out? Or, do you have time to discuss some options? Just photos of paperwork with a message. They need this by Friday. David decided he wanted to go back to school for his master's degree. Great, right? Continuing education, bettering himself, finally getting serious about his future. Except his idea of getting serious about his future involved me getting serious about his tuition payments. The conversation happened during Sunday dinner at my parents' house. Harper, you always said education was important, he said, cutting into his pot roast like he was cutting into my budget. It is important, I agreed, not yet seeing where this was heading. Well, I've been thinking about that MBA program we talked about, the one at State. We had never talked about any MBA program, but I nodded along. The thing is, financial aid for graduate school is mostly loans. And my credit, he shrugged like his destroyed credit score was just one of those unavoidable things, like bad weather or traffic jams. I could co-sign, I offered, because apparently I'm genetically programmed to volunteer for financial responsibility. Actually, I was thinking you could just handle the tuition directly. It's only 2 years, and you're doing so well with your business. Only 2 years. Like 24 months of graduate school tuition was pocket change. But here's the thing about family dynamics. Once you establish yourself as the solver of financial problems, questioning any individual request makes you look petty. It's not like they were asking me to buy them luxury cars or vacation homes. These were reasonable needs: transportation, education, housing. The fact that their reasonable needs always seemed to become my financial obligations wasn't something anyone wanted to examine too closely. Claire's marriage hit a rough patch during year 2. Nothing dramatic, just the normal adjustments of two people learning to live together. But instead of working it out like most couples do, Claire decided the solution was a bigger apartment in a better neighborhood. We just need more space, she explained during our monthly coffee date, the one family tradition where they actually seemed interested in seeing me. The place we're in now is too small, too noisy. It's causing stress in our relationship. I wanted to point out that bigger apartments generally cost more money, which tends to cause more stress in relationships. But Claire was already showing me listings on her phone. Look at this one. It's perfect. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, in-unit laundry, and it's only $800 more per month. Only $800 more per month. The casual way my family discussed large sums of my money never stopped amazing me. The thing is, Claire continued, our credit took a hit with some of the wedding expenses, so we'd need a co-signer for the lease application. Of course they would. The strangest part wasn't that they kept asking for help. The strangest part was how normal it had become. How seamlessly these conversations flowed from, how was your week, to, can you restructure your budget to accommodate our latest financial need? I'd become so accustomed to being the family's financial solution that I'd stopped questioning whether it was healthy for any of us. But that was before I realized they'd stopped seeing me as family altogether. My 27th birthday fell on a Saturday in March. For weeks, I'd been dropping hints about wanting to celebrate. Nothing elaborate, just dinner with the family, maybe a cake. The kind of simple celebration that most families do automatically. I'd spent the previous month closing the biggest deal of my career, a historic property downtown that sold for $2.4 million. The commission alone was more money than most people see in 2 years. I was proud, excited, ready to share good news with the people who were supposed to care about my successes. The week of my birthday, I mentioned it during my usual check-in call with my mother. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful about the sale," she said, though her tone suggested she was probably doing something else while talking to me. "You're so good with those house things." House things. $2.4 million in house things. "So I was thinking," I continued, "maybe we could all get together this weekend? For my birthday?" "Your birthday?" There was a pause. The kind of pause that happens when someone is checking a calendar and realizing they've forgotten something important. "Oh, honey, this weekend is busy. David has that art show opening, and Claire's got her book club thing." Art show opening. I'd been supporting David's artistic endeavors for 3 years, funding everything from canvas and paints to booth fees at local craft fairs. This was the first I'd heard of any show opening. "What art show?" I asked. "Didn't he tell you? It's at that little gallery downtown. He's been working toward this for months." Months. My brother had been working towards something for months and hadn't mentioned it to me once. "That's great," I said, meaning it. "What time does it start? I'd love to come support him." Another pause. "Well, it's a very small venue. Limited space. I think it's really more for, serious art people." Serious art people, not sisters who'd been funding the art supplies. "Mom, it's my birthday weekend." "I know, sweetheart, and we'll absolutely celebrate soon. Maybe next weekend? Or the week after?" Soon. Next weekend. The week after. The vague future scheduling that means never. I hung up feeling disappointed but not devastated. Families have scheduling conflicts. People forget birthdays. It happens. So I made my own plans. I booked a table at Marseille, the French restaurant downtown that I'd been wanting to try. Made a reservation for 8 people. My parents, David, Claire and her husband, and a couple of my close friends. Sent everyone a text with the details. "Birthday dinner Saturday at 7. Can't wait to celebrate with my favorite people." The responses came in slowly throughout the week. David: "Sounds great. Looking forward to it." Claire: "Wouldn't miss it." Mom: "We'll be there, honey." My friends Sarah and Marcus confirmed immediately. Claire's husband Tom sent a thumbs-up emoji. Saturday afternoon, I spent an embarrassing amount of time getting ready. Hair appointment at 2, manicure at 3:30, shopping for the perfect dress that said, "Successful woman celebrating her achievements with people she loves." I arrived at Marseille 15 minutes early, partly from excitement and partly from nerves. The host showed me to our reserved table, a beautiful spot by the window, with a view of the city lights starting to twinkle in the early evening. 7 o'clock came and went. I ordered wine and told the server we were waiting for the rest of our party. 7:30. I texted the group chat. "Running late? No problem. I'm here whenever you arrive." 8 o'clock. I called my mother. "Oh, honey," she said, and I could hear voices and laughter in the background. "David's art show is running longer than expected. We're still here." "What about dinner? It's my birthday dinner. It's my—" "We'll catch up with you later, okay? This is really important for David." They were all there, at David's art show that nobody had thought to invite me to, on my birthday. I sat at that table until 9:30, making excuses to the server, pretending to check messages on my phone, watching other families and friends share meals and laughter while I celebrated my 27th birthday alone. The worst part wasn't the loneliness. The worst part was the realization that they'd made plans without me and forgotten they'd made plans with me. In their minds, David's art show was important family business. My birthday dinner was just optional. That night, I went home to my empty apartment and did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not the frustrated tears that come with a difficult day at work, but the deep, hollow crying that comes when you realize you've been fooling yourself about something fundamental. I'd thought I was the successful daughter who helped out the family. Turns out, I was just the bank account they occasionally had dinner with. But I wasn't ready to face that truth yet. I still had hope that they'd make it up to me, that they'd realize they'd hurt me and find a way to show they cared. Hope, as it turns out, can be more dangerous than disappointment. The thing about being hurt by your family is that you keep giving them opportunities to make it better. Some people would call this forgiveness. I call it denial with a side of pathological optimism. After the birthday disaster, I decided to take control of the situation. If they weren't going to plan celebrations that included me, I'd plan celebrations that they couldn't ignore. I spent the next week researching restaurants, checking everyone's schedules, and planning what I convinced myself would be a redemptive family gathering. Not for my birthday, that ship had sailed, but for Easter Sunday, which was coming up in 3 weeks. This time, I didn't just make a reservation and send a text. I called each family member individually, confirmed their availability, sent calendar invites, and even offered to pick up my parents since Dad had been complaining about driving in city traffic. "That sounds lovely, honey," my mother said when I called to confirm details. "It's so nice that you want to bring the family together." Nice that I wanted to bring the family together. Like family togetherness was my peculiar hobby instead of a normal human desire. I chose Bella Vista, an Italian restaurant with a private dining room that could accommodate 8 people comfortably. I pre-ordered a meal that would showcase their best dishes. Antipasto to start, 3 different pasta options, their famous osso buco, and a selection of desserts. I even bought gifts. Nothing expensive or flashy, just thoughtful items that showed I paid attention to their interests. A rare art book for David, a best-selling novel from Claire's favorite author, a vintage wine for my father, artisanal chocolates for my mother. Easter Sunday morning, I woke up feeling genuinely excited for the first time in weeks. Today would be different. Today, my family would see that I wasn't just their financial backup plan. I was someone who cared about creating meaningful moments together. I arrived at the restaurant 30 minutes early to make sure everything was perfect. The private dining room was beautiful with warm lighting and a view of the garden. The staff had arranged the table exactly as I'd requested, with small bouquets of spring flowers and the gifts positioned at each place setting. 1 o'clock came and went. At 1:15, I called my mother. "Oh, sweetheart, we're running a bit late. You know how your father is with Sunday afternoon naps." "No problem," I said, though I could feel familiar knots forming in my stomach. "Should I push the reservation back?" No, we'll be there soon." 1:30 became 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock became 2:30. I was now making my second round of apologies to the restaurant staff when my phone rang. It was Claire. "Harper, I'm so sorry. Tom's not feeling well, and I don't want to leave him alone. Can we reschedule?" "He's sick?" I asked. "Is it serious? Do you need anything?" "Just a headache, but you know how men are with being sick." I knew how men were with being sick. I also knew how my family was with commitments to me. What about everyone else? Are they still coming? "Oh, I think Mom and Dad got delayed with something. And David said he might have to work late." Might have to work late. David's weekend shifts at the coffee shop weren't exactly unpredictable emergency obligations. I sat in that empty private dining room for another hour, surrounded by 8 place settings, 8 gifts, and 8 chairs that would remain empty. The server kept refilling my water glass and pretending not to notice that I was dining alone in a room designed for a celebration that wasn't happening. Finally, I asked for the check. The restaurant still charged me for the full meal. They'd already started preparing the food based on my pre-order. $240 for a dinner party that existed only in my imagination. As I drove home that evening, carrying a bag full of gifts that would never be opened and flowers that would never be appreciated, I realized something that should have been obvious months ago. This wasn't about scheduling conflicts or last-minute emergencies. This was about priorities, and I wasn't one of theirs. But even then, sitting in my car in the parking garage of my apartment building, holding wilted flowers and receipts for a celebration that never happened, I wasn't ready to give up on my family. I was, however, ready to start paying attention to what they did instead of what they said they would do. That attention would prove to be very educational. Have you ever experienced that moment when you suddenly see something that's been hiding in plain sight? Like when you realize the optical illusion picture contains a completely different image than what you thought you were looking at. That's what happened to me on a random Tuesday in October when I was scrolling through Instagram and saw my sister's latest post. It was a photo from what looked like a beautiful outdoor brunch. Mimosas in crystal glasses, perfectly plated eggs Benedict, autumn leaves providing a gorgeous natural backdrop. The caption read, "Sunday family brunches are the best. So grateful for these people. Family time, chai charsh blessed, chai char Sunday fun." Tagged in the photo were my parents, David and Claire's husband Tom. Everyone was there, laughing and looking genuinely happy to be together. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to understand what I was seeing. My family, having Sunday brunch, without me, looking like they were having the kind of family time I'd been trying to create for months. I scrolled up through Claire's recent posts and found more photos. A hiking trip from 3 weeks ago, where everyone was wearing matching t-shirts that said Family Adventure Squad. David's birthday dinner from last month at the same Italian restaurant where I'd planned our Easter gathering. Mom and Dad's anniversary celebration that I apparently hadn't been invited to. All of these events had happened during weeks when I'd asked about getting together and been told everyone was too busy. I started scrolling through David's Instagram. More of the same. family game night at mom and dad's house, a weekend trip to the lake where they'd rented a cabin, Claire helping him move into a new apartment. An apartment I was co-signing for but apparently wasn't invited to see. My mother didn't have Instagram, but my father had recently joined at David's insistence. His account was mostly photos of his garden and his weekend woodworking projects, but scattered throughout were pictures of family gatherings. Family gatherings I hadn't known were happening. The evidence was overwhelming. My family had a rich social life together. They went on trips, celebrated milestones, shared meals, and created memories. They just did all of it without me. I was their financial partner, but not their emotional family member. That Tuesday evening, I did something I'd never done before. I called my mother and directly asked about one of the gatherings I'd seen online. "Mom, I saw Claire's photos from Sunday brunch. It looked really nice." There was a pause. The kind of pause that happens when someone realizes they've been caught in something they didn't think anyone would notice. "Oh, that. It was just a spur-of-the-moment thing." David had a break between his shifts, and we decided to meet up. It looked pretty elaborate for spur-of-the-moment. The restaurant, the table set up. Well, you know how Claire is with her photos. She makes everything look fancier than it really was. I knew how Claire was with photos. I also knew how my mother was with excuses. "Why didn't you invite me? I would have loved to join you." "Honey, you're always so busy with work. We didn't want to bother you." Too busy with work. The work that was paying for their bills. The work they criticized as house things when it suited them and respected as important when they needed to justify excluding me. "Mom, I'm never too busy for family time, you know that." "Of course, sweetheart. Next time we'll definitely include you." Next time. The promise that had been getting smaller and more hollow each time she made it. But this time, I didn't let the conversation end there. "Actually, let's plan something now. What about Thanksgiving? I could make reservations somewhere nice. Or if you prefer, I could host at my apartment." "Oh, Thanksgiving. Well, we usually keep that pretty low-key. Just immediate family, you know?" Immediate family. I was their daughter, but somehow not immediate family. "Mom," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, "I am immediate family." "Of course you are, honey. I just meant, you know, the people who are usually around." The people who are usually around. Not the daughter who's been supporting the family financially for 9 years, but the people who are usually around for the fun parts. After I hung up, I sat in my living room, looking around at all the evidence of my successful life. The awards from my real estate company. The photos from business trips to beautiful locations. The expensive furniture I'd bought with commissions from deals that my family dismissed as house things. I'd built a life I was proud of, but I'd been living it in service to people who saw me as useful rather than essential. That night, I made a decision that would have felt impossible 6 months earlier. I stopped trying to force my way into family gatherings and started paying attention to what my life looked like without them. It looked surprisingly like it had space for people who actually wanted to be around me. But first, I had to get through one more holiday season. One more attempt to be the daughter they wanted me to be. That attempt would end with my mother telling me I'd been invited out of pity, and me finally understanding that some relationships aren't worth saving, even if they're family. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of perfect snow that makes everything look like a greeting card. I'd spent weeks preparing for this day, convinced that maybe, just maybe, this would be the holiday that brought us together as a real family. I'd bought thoughtful gifts for everyone. A vintage camera for David's photography hobby, a leather-bound journal for Claire's writing aspirations, a cashmere scarf for Mom, and a bottle of aged whiskey for Dad. I'd even learned to make a traditional French dessert, tarte tatin, during my business trip to Lyon last month. Because apparently I'm a slow learner when it comes to family dynamics. The invitation had come 3 days before Christmas. Not a warm, "We'd love to have you join us," but a casual, "You can come to Christmas dinner if you want," from my mother during one of our increasingly strained phone calls. I should have recognized the tone. It was the same tone you'd use to invite someone to a movie you're not particularly excited about seeing. But hope dies hard, and I showed up at their house at 2 o'clock with my arms full of gifts and my heart full of ridiculous optimism. The first hour was actually pleasant. We opened presents, and everyone seemed genuinely pleased with what I'd brought. David immediately loaded film into the vintage camera and started taking photos. Claire ran her fingers over the soft leather of the journal and promised to start writing again. For a moment, I thought maybe I'd been overthinking everything. Maybe we were going to be okay. Then I offered to help with dinner preparations and followed my mother into the kitchen. She was standing at the stove, stirring gravy with one hand and checking her phone with the other. Claire was sitting at the kitchen island, showing Dad photos from her latest Instagram posts on her tablet. "The dessert I brought is in the refrigerator," I said, opening the door to check on the tarte tatin. It needs to come to room temperature before we serve it. That's nice, dear, Mom said without looking up from her phone. I started setting the dining room table, counting places for 6 people. Mom, Dad, David, Claire, Tom, and me. A full family Christmas dinner. That's when I overheard the conversation that changed everything. She seems to be trying harder lately, Claire was saying to Dad in a voice just quiet enough that they thought I couldn't hear from the next room. Guilt, probably, Dad replied. Success makes some people feel guilty about family. My mother's voice cut through their speculation with the precision of a scalpel. You only got invited out of pity. Don't stay too long. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood frozen in the dining room, holding the cloth napkins I'd been folding, trying to process what I'd just heard. Pity. I'd been invited to Christmas dinner out of pity. 9 years of financial support. 9 years of trying to earn a place at their table. 9 years of believing that if I just tried harder, gave more, showed up more consistently, they'd finally see me as valuable. And I'd been invited out of pity. I walked back into the kitchen where the conversation immediately stopped. 3 faces turned toward me with expressions that tried to look innocent but mostly looked guilty. Is dinner almost ready? I asked, my voice somehow remaining steady. About another hour, Mom said, not quite meeting my eyes. I nodded, walked to where I'd left my wine glass on the counter, and finished it in one slow, deliberate sip. The Pinot Noir tasted like disappointment and clarity. I think I'm going to head home, I said, setting the glass down carefully. But we haven't had dinner yet, Claire protested, though her protest sounded more like obligation than genuine disappointment. I'm not feeling well, I said, which was true in every way that mattered. I gathered my coat and purse while they offered half-hearted protests about staying, about feeling better soon, about taking some food home with me. As I walked to the front door, I could hear my mother telling the others that I'd probably been working too hard, that I'd seemed stressed lately, that they should give me space to figure things out. They were already rewriting the narrative, turning my moment of clarity into my problem to solve. I drove home through the perfect Christmas snow, and for the first time in 9 years, I didn't cry about my family. I didn't feel sad or disappointed or hurt. I felt free. That evening, sitting in my apartment with takeout Chinese food and a bottle of wine that I didn't have to share, I made a decision that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. If they could only see me as worthy of pity, then they could learn to live without my help altogether. What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments, because what I did over the next 3 weeks was something my family never saw coming. You know what's funny about family members who take you for granted? They never actually keep track of what you're providing. They just know that somehow, mysteriously, their bills get paid. The Monday after Christmas, I started making phone calls. Hi, I need to remove my name from this account and transfer responsibility back to the primary account holder. I said this sentence 17 times over the course of 3 days. Electric company, gas company, water department, cable provider, cell phone service, car insurance, health insurance, credit card companies, bank loans, the mortgage company, and David's apartment management office. Each conversation followed the same pattern. The customer service representative would pull up the account, see that I'd been paying for months or years, and ask if I was sure I wanted to make this change. Yes, I said each time. I'm absolutely sure. Some transfers were easier than others. The utilities just required signatures from my parents confirming they wanted to assume responsibility. The credit cards were more complicated. I had to officially remove David and Claire as authorized users and request new accounts be opened in their names for any remaining balances. The apartment lease was the most satisfying call to make. Ma'am, the leasing office manager said when I explained the situation, if you remove your name from the lease, the remaining tenant will need to requalify on his own or find a replacement cosigner. I understand, I said. His current income and credit score don't meet our requirements for this unit. I understand that too. There was a pause. He'll need to make alternative arrangements by the end of his current lease term. That sounds like something he should probably start working on. I wasn't being cruel, I was being honest. David was 26 years old with a college degree. If he wanted to live in an apartment that cost more than he could afford on his own, that was a problem for David to solve. The most complex situation was the mortgage. Removing my name from the loan would require my parents to refinance, and given Dad's employment situation and Mom's part-time income, they'd likely need to find a smaller house or bring in additional income. Again, not my problem to solve. By Wednesday evening, I'd successfully extracted myself from every financial obligation I'd taken on for my family over the past 9 years. It felt like performing surgery on my own life. Painful, but necessary. The paperwork would take a few weeks to process completely, and the companies would send notifications to the account holders about the changes. But essentially, As of January 1st, my family would be responsible for their own bills for the first time in nearly a decade. I spent New Year's Eve alone in my apartment, drinking champagne and reading a novel I'd been too busy to finish for months. At midnight, when the fireworks started outside my window, I toasted to the most expensive lesson I'd ever learned about family dynamics. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I started planning a life that had nothing to do with what anyone else needed from me. I booked a vacation. Not a long weekend or a quick business trip, but a real vacation. 2 weeks in Costa Rica, staying at a beautiful eco lodge, taking photography classes, learning to surf, eating at restaurants where nobody knew my name or my credit score. I signed up for French cooking classes on Tuesday evenings. I joined a book club that met monthly at an independent bookstore downtown. I bought season tickets to the symphony. For the first time since college, I started building a social life based on what I enjoyed instead of what my family needed. The silence from my family was golden. No calls asking for help with bills, no texts about financial emergencies, no guilt trips about family obligations. I assumed they were handling the transition period better than I'd expected. I assumed they'd found other solutions to their financial challenges. I was wrong. They were just waiting for the bills to arrive. 20 days after Christmas, my phone started ringing at 7 in the morning. I was getting ready for work, standing in my bathroom applying mascara, when my mother's name appeared on my screen. I almost didn't answer. Early morning calls from family usually meant some kind of crisis that was about to become my emergency. But curiosity won. "Harper," my mother's voice was tight with panic. "We need to talk. Right now." "Good morning to you too, Mom." "What's wrong?" "What's wrong?" Her voice pitched higher. "What's wrong is that our electricity got shut off yesterday. And when I called the company, they said the account was transferred back to us 3 weeks ago, and we have an outstanding balance of $468. I paused with my mascara wand halfway to my lashes. "Did you pay the bill?" "How was I supposed to know there was a bill to pay? You've been handling that for years." This was fascinating. Apparently, in my mother's mind, bills were like weather, something that happened to other people. "Mom, when you have an electricity account in your name, they send you bills. Every month. To your address." "Don't get smart with me, young lady. What I want to know is why you canceled our accounts without discussing it with anyone." I set down my mascara and gave this conversation my full attention. I removed my name from accounts that were never supposed to be my responsibility in the first place. "Your responsibility? Harper, we're family. Family helps each other. Family helps each other." The phrase that had been used to justify 9 years of financial dependence. "You're absolutely right," I said. "Family does help each other. When was the last time you helped me with anything?" Silence. "I've been paying your bills for 9 years, Mom. 9 years of electric bills, gas bills, water bills, insurance payments, loan payments. And the thanks I got was being invited to Christmas dinner out of pity. That's not—" "You misunderstood what you heard." "Did I? Because it sounded pretty clear to me." My phone started beeping with an incoming call. David's name flashed on the screen. "Mom, I have another call coming in. We'll have to continue this conversation later." "Harper, don't you dare hang up on me. We need to figure out how to fix this situation." "The situation where you're responsible for your own bills? That's not a situation that needs fixing. That's called being an adult." I switched to David's call. "Harper, thank God." David's voice was frantic. "My landlord just called. He says you removed your name from my lease, and I need to requalify or move out by the end of the month." "That's correct." "What do you mean that's correct? Why would you do that?" I sat down on my bed, suddenly feeling very tired. "David, you're 26 years old. You have a college degree and a job. Why do you need your sister to co-sign your apartment lease?" "Because my credit is, not great." "Right. And whose fault is that?" "That's not the point. The point is that I can't afford this place on my own, and I can't find anywhere else this nice in my price range. Then you need to either increase your income or adjust your expectations about what kind of apartment you can afford." "Harper, you're being completely unreasonable. This is going to mess up my whole life." His whole life. The drama of it would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. "David, for the past 3 years, I've been subsidizing your lifestyle. I've been the reason you could afford an apartment that was beyond your means. That's not sustainable, and it's not fair to me." "Fair to you? You make 10 times what I make. This doesn't even affect your budget." And there it was. The assumption that had been underlying every family financial request for 9 years. Because I made good money, their financial problems didn't matter to me. How much I make doesn't determine what I'm obligated to spend on other people. Other people? I'm your brother. You're my brother when you need money. What are you the rest of the time? He hung up on me. My phone immediately rang again. Claire this time. This was going to be a long day. Harper Elizabeth Williams, you have completely lost your mind. Claire didn't even say hello when I answered her call. She jumped straight into full attack mode, which was honestly more direct communication than I'd gotten from my family in years. Good morning, Claire. How are you? How am I? I'm dealing with the fallout from your apparent nervous breakdown. Tom and I just got a notice that our credit card account has been closed, and the balance transferred to a new account in our names only, with an immediate payment due of $1,200. $1,200. I tried to remember what they'd charged on that card. Claire's designer work clothes, probably. A few dinners out. Some online shopping. That's the balance you accumulated, I said reasonably. Now it's your responsibility to pay it. Our responsibility? Harper, you added us to your credit cards. You said it was for emergencies. I added you to my credit cards 3 years ago when you needed to buy furniture for your apartment and your credit applications kept getting denied. That was supposed to be temporary. Well, nobody told us it was temporary. Nobody told them. As if basic financial responsibility required written instructions. Claire, did you think I was going to pay your credit card bills for the rest of your life? I thought you cared about family. There it was again. Caring about family apparently meant indefinite financial support with no questions asked. I do care about family. That's why I spent 9 years supporting all of you financially. That's why I skipped vacations and worked overtime and put money into your lives instead of my own retirement savings. Then why are you stopping now? The question hung in the air between us. Why was I stopping now? Because I finally realized that you don't see me as family. You see me as a bank account with a person attached. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When was the last time you invited me somewhere without needing something from me? When was the last time any of you celebrated my successes or supported me through a difficult time? Silence. Claire, in 9 years of helping this family financially, not once has anyone asked if I could afford what you were requesting. Not once has anyone said thank you. Not once has anyone offered to pay me back or suggested that maybe I'd done enough. We appreciate everything you've done. No, you don't. You expect everything I've done. There's a difference. My phone was beeping again. A call from my father this time. I have to go, Claire. Dad's calling. Harper, please. We can work this out. Family works things out. Family does work things out. I agreed. But first, family has to want to be family. You all made it very clear at Christmas that I'm not really part of this family. I'm just someone you tolerate out of pity. I hung up and answered my father's call. Harper. His voice had the tone he used to use when I was 16 and had missed curfew. Your mother is very upset. I imagine she is. Having your electricity shut off is probably upsetting. Don't be flip with me, young lady. We need to discuss this situation like adults. I agree. Adults pay their own bills. Adults don't expect other people to subsidize their lifestyles indefinitely. Adults say thank you when someone helps them and please when they need assistance. Harper, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this behavior is unacceptable. Which behavior, exactly? The behavior where I paid your bills for 9 years? Or the behavior where I stopped? The behavior where you're abandoning your family out of spite. Abandoning my family. As if financial support was the only thing that made me a daughter. Dad, I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm just not paying everyone's bills anymore. If that feels like abandonment to you, that says something pretty significant about what my role in this family has been. Your role in this family is to be our daughter. Daughters help their parents when they can. And sons? What's David's role? What's Claire's role? Silence. That's what I thought, I said. I have to get to work now. I have clients to call and properties to show. You know, the job that you all dismiss as house things, but that's been keeping your lights on for 9 years. I hung up before he could respond. For the rest of the day, my phone buzzed constantly with texts, voicemails, and missed calls from various family members. Each message was some variation of, "You're being selfish," or "We can't believe you do this," or "Family doesn't abandon family." Not one message asked how I was doing. Not one message acknowledged that maybe, just maybe, they'd taken advantage of my generosity. Not one message suggested that they might need to examine their own behavior. By evening, I had 17 missed calls and 43 unread text messages from my family. I deleted them all without reading them and poured myself a glass of wine. Tomorrow, I was going to do something I hadn't done in 9 years. I was going to spend my money on myself. The travel agent looked at me like I'd just asked her to book me a trip to Mars. You want to leave this weekend? For how long? 2 weeks. Maybe 3. I'm flexible. And you're interested in anywhere? As long as it's not here? I laughed, realizing how that sounded. I want to go somewhere beautiful, where I can learn something new. eat amazing food, and not think about family drama for a while. She pulled up her computer and started typing. I have some ideas. That Friday, while my family was presumably figuring out how to pay their own bills for the first time in 9 years, I was boarding a plane to Barcelona. I'd never been to Spain. I'd never traveled anywhere alone for pure pleasure. For 9 years, my vacation budget had been redirected to family emergencies and other people's needs. Sitting in that airplane seat, looking out the window as we lifted off, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Excitement about my own life. Barcelona was revelation. I stayed in a boutique hotel in the Gothic Quarter, took flamenco lessons, learned to make paella from a grandmother who spoke no English, but somehow taught me everything I needed to know about cooking with passion. I ate dinner at 10 p.m. like a proper Spanish person. I wandered through art museums without checking my phone every 10 minutes. I bought expensive shoes just because they were beautiful and I wanted them. For 2 weeks, I was just Harper. Not the family ATM, not the responsible daughter, not the person everyone called when they needed something. Just a woman exploring a beautiful city and remembering what it felt like to live for herself. When I returned home, I had 76 missed calls from family members and an inbox full of increasingly frantic emails. I didn't return any of them. Instead, I signed up for Spanish lessons twice a week. I joined a hiking group that met every Saturday morning. I started volunteering at a literacy program on Sunday afternoons. My life became full in ways that had nothing to do with family obligations or financial responsibility for other people's choices. Spring turned into summer. I took a weekend trip to Nashville with my book club. I went wine tasting in Virginia with a woman from my hiking group who was quickly becoming a real friend. The kind of friend who called to check on me when I'd had a bad day at work, not when she needed something. The family calls eventually stopped. I assume they figured out how to manage their finances or found other people to help them, or downsized their lifestyles to match their actual incomes. I didn't know, and for the first time in 9 years, I didn't feel guilty about not knowing. In August, my Spanish teacher mentioned that she was leading a small group trip to Italy in the fall, advanced students only, focusing on art history and cooking classes in Tuscany. You should come, she said after class one evening. Your Spanish is good enough that picking up some Italian won't be difficult, and I think you'd love the experience. I signed up that night. 2 months later, I was standing in the kitchen of a centuries-old farmhouse outside Florence, learning to make fresh pasta from Nonna Maria, whose hands had been making these same motions for 70 years. The other students in our group were fascinating people: a retired teacher from Canada, a young architect from Germany, 2 sisters from Australia who were celebrating their retirement from nursing, and Marco. Marco was our guide's nephew, a chef who'd trained in Paris and New York before coming home to help run the family's agriturismo. He was funny, intelligent, completely bilingual, and had the kind of warm smile that made everyone around him feel immediately welcomed. He was also apparently interested in the American real estate agent who kept asking detailed questions about the local architecture. You see buildings differently than most tourists, he said one evening as we walked through a nearby village after dinner. It's my job, I explained. I help people find homes. You can't do that well unless you understand what makes a space feel like home instead of just a house. And what makes a space feel like home? I thought about it. People who want you there. He stopped walking and looked at me. That sounds like personal experience talking. I found myself telling him about my family, about the 9 years of financial support, about the Christmas dinner invitation that came from pity, about the moment I realized that paying someone's bills doesn't make you important to them. It just makes you useful. Marco listened without judgment, asked thoughtful questions, and never once suggested that I should have handled things differently. Family is supposed to be your safe place, he said when I finished. The people who celebrate your successes and support you through difficulties. It sounds like yours got confused about which role they were playing in your life. That conversation led to daily walks, which led to cooking lessons that were really just excuses to spend time together, which led to long talks about dreams and disappointments, and the courage it takes to build a life that actually fits who you are. On my last night in Italy, Marco asked if I'd consider extending my stay. I know you have a life to get back to, he said, but I also know that life doesn't seem to be making you very happy. He was right. My life was successful by external measures, but it wasn't particularly joyful. What are you suggesting? Stay through Christmas. Meet my family. Let me show you what it looks like when people are genuinely excited to have you at their table. I stayed. Christmas morning in Tuscany dawned crisp and bright, with the kind of golden light that makes everything look like a Renaissance painting. I woke up in the guest room of Marco's family farmhouse, listening to voices and laughter drifting up from the kitchen below. For a moment, I felt the familiar anxiety that had dominated my holiday seasons for years. The worry about whether I'd brought the right gifts, whether I'd be welcome, whether I'd somehow disappoint the people I was trying to please. Then I remembered where I was, and with whom, and the anxiety dissolved into something I hadn't felt on Christmas morning in years. Genuine excitement. Marco's family had embraced me with a warmth that felt both foreign and exactly what I'd been missing my entire life. His mother, Elena, had insisted on teaching me her grandmother's recipe for Christmas bread. His father, Giuseppe, had spent hours showing me their olive groves and explaining the history of their land. His sister Sophia treated me like the sister she'd never had, and his grandfather told stories that made everyone laugh until their sides ached. Nobody asked what I did for work, and then dismissed it as unimportant. Nobody made jokes about my lack of a husband or children. Nobody treated my presence like an obligation or a charity case. They were just happy I was there. On Christmas Eve, Marco had taken me to midnight mass in the village church, then for a walk through the vineyards under a sky full of stars. "I have something to ask you," he'd said, stopping beside an ancient olive tree that his great-grandfather had planted. I thought he was going to ask about my plans for returning to the States, about whether this extended vacation could become something more permanent. Instead, he dropped to one knee. "Harper Williams," he said, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. "You are the most courageous, generous, beautiful woman I've ever known. You've spent your whole life taking care of other people, and I want to spend the rest of mine taking care of you. Will you marry me?" The ring was perfect, a simple solitaire that caught the starlight like it had been waiting its whole existence for this moment. But more than the ring, more than the romantic setting, more than the fact that this incredibly wonderful man wanted to spend his life with me, what took my breath away was his words. "You've spent your whole life taking care of other people, and I want to spend the rest of mine taking care of you." Nobody had ever wanted to take care of me. I'd been the caretaker, the problem solver, the one who handled things so others didn't have to worry. "Yes," I whispered, and then louder. "Yes, absolutely yes." Christmas morning brought a flurry of excited phone calls to Marco's extended family, sharing our news. Elena insisted on opening a bottle of champagne with breakfast. Giuseppe started making plans for our wedding celebration. Sophia immediately began designing what she declared would be the most beautiful wedding dress ever created. In the middle of all the joyful chaos, my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. For a moment, the old guilt tried to surface. It was Christmas morning. Maybe I should answer. Maybe they'd finally realized. "Don't," Marco said quietly, noticing my hesitation. "Not today. Today is about joy." He was right. I let the call go to voicemail. Later, when the Christmas celebration had wound down and I was sitting by the fireplace with a glass of wine and my new fiancé's arm around me, I listened to the message. "Harper, it's Mom. I know we haven't talked in months, but it's Christmas, and I was hoping we could work things out. The family isn't the same without you. Please call me back. The family isn't the same without me." After months of silence, after making it clear that my value to them was purely financial, they missed me. But as I sat there in that warm, welcoming home, surrounded by people who loved me for who I was rather than what I could provide, I realized something important. I didn't miss them. I missed the idea of them, the family I'd always hoped we could be. But I didn't miss the reality of people who only valued my presence when they needed something from me. "Everything okay?" Marco asked, noticing my thoughtful expression. "Everything is perfect," I said, meaning it completely. 6 months later, we were married in the garden of his family's farmhouse, surrounded by olive trees and grapevines and people who celebrated our love without reservation. My friend Sarah flew in from home to be my maid of honor. My Spanish teacher came with her husband. My book club friends sent a beautiful handmade quilt. My family didn't attend. Not because they weren't invited. I'd sent announcements because it felt like the right thing to do, but because they'd made their choice about what kind of relationship we would have, and I'd finally made mine. Sometimes people ask if I regret cutting ties with my family, if I miss them, if I think I'll ever reconcile with them. The honest answer is that I don't regret building a life based on mutual respect and genuine affection instead of financial obligation and family guilt. I don't miss being seen as useful rather than valuable, and I can't reconcile with people who refuse to acknowledge that they did anything wrong. But I don't sit around feeling bitter about it either, because here's what I've learned. The family you're born into doesn't have to be the family you choose to keep. Sometimes the people who love you best are the ones who choose you intentionally, not the ones who are stuck with you by accident of genetics. I'm Harper Williams Romano now, and I wake up every day in a house full of people who are genuinely happy I'm there. My husband brings me coffee in bed every morning and asks about my dreams from the night before. His family calls to check on me when I travel for business. Our friends invite us to things because they enjoy our company, not because they need something from us. I still work in real estate, but now I help people find homes in both Italy and the States. My business has expanded in ways I never imagined, and I've discovered that success feels different when you're building it for yourself instead of using it to purchase other people's approval. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about finding the courage to choose yourself. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do is stop accepting less than you deserve, even from family, especially from family.